We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
The world of classical music. The world which Daniel Barenboim masters and one he lives to share with all, hoping that one day everybody will understand it. Barenboim is fighting to use this universal language, as he puts it, as a means to unite people. He wants to bring music down from its ivory tower and make it part of basic education. In 1999, he founded the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, an ensemble of young Arab and Israeli musicians. To him, this is an orchestra against ignorance. He believes that those who listen to each other, both musically and in all other ways, can achieve great things. Barenboim was born of Jewish Russian parents. He moved to Israel in 1952 and is now proud to say he's the only man with a Palestinian and an Israeli passport. He is an opinionated critic of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories, but also says Palestinians need to accept that Israel is a reality. Music is the art of most resistance, he says. So when he was scheduled to play in Qatar in January, there was a heated debate on social networks. Some even doubted that locals would come to listen to the Jewish maestro. But hundreds filled the seats in Doha Opera House. They gave Barenboim a standing ovation. He believes in defying politics with his music. When we first asked Daniel Barenboim to talk to us, he said it was impossible to speak about music. He then proved himself wrong and went some way towards explaining its mystery. Maestro Barenboim, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.
You've said in the past that music is innate in us, whether a musical genius like you or an avid listener like me. It's very much part of the fabric of humanity.
Yes, I believe so. I think that the problem is that there is no music education, nowhere in the world, not even in countries that provided us with most of the music we play, like Germany and Austria. Music is not considered part of the general education. And therefore there are so many people who are very intelligent, very developed in so many ways, who have had absolutely no contact with music. And I think this is due to the fact that music gives us the tools to forget many things. But music also has another dimension, a dimension that says what Sigmund Freud said about art in general, that it is not an escape from reality, but it creates a bigger reality.
Where does it come from? Where does music come from, in your view?
Well, music is very difficult to talk about music because music expresses itself in sound. Therefore, you cannot describe it with words. If I could explain to you, or somebody could explain to me, the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven, we wouldn't need to play it. The fact that we play it is because this is the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven.
And it has an effect on you as a listener.
It has an effect, yes, but it is that. Therefore, when we talk about music, we talk about our reaction to music rather than about music itself. But I think that music must become, in the 21st century, music must become part of the general education. It must become part of culture, like you study literature and geography and mathematics at school, you should study music too. Otherwise, music will disappear. Classical music will disappear for the simple reason that if it is to forget, now with the television and with the internet and the Facebook and Twitter and all these amazing means of communication, things, you know, you can forget things and occupy yourself with so many things. If music is here only to make us forget ourselves and the world, then I'm afraid it will disappear.
Well, there are many people who would agree with that and would say that music is no more than auditory cheesecake, was how one person put it.
Yeah, well, I don't think so, but I'm obviously in the minority. You know, I have been around for so long, I have done so many things in my life. This is what I would like to do, is to really see if I can not make a radical change towards the attitude of music, to take music out of this ivory tower where it is now and make it part of their life. Because when you see, for instance, look here in Doha, it's not, it is a wonderful place, but it's not a place with a great culture of music. Why should it? It didn't have. Or when I played in Ramallah, I went to Ghana in Africa and all this thing. And people listen to the music. Last night I played here in this same hall a very difficult program of late Schubert sonatas. It was amazing with what concentration and silence the public listened to them.
Maestro, you talked about the internet a little bit earlier. Do you get this sense that despite the fact that it's made the world super connected in a way, that actually the opposite is happening, that communities are falling apart, that people aren't as connected as they once were?
I think it's absolutely true. People are not as connected. The proof is that you sit to have a coffee with a friend and they are with the telephone. I remember when I went to Gaza, I remember the looks on the public's eyes when they were asked to switch the mobiles off because there was going to be a concert. You know, it's quite amazing, really quite amazing. And then I will never forget that day, because after the concert in Gaza, I got the greatest compliment that I've had at any moment in my life. There was a Palestinian gentleman who thanked me profusely for coming in. I said, well, you're very welcome. I was very happy to come. No, it was very important that you came. And he insisted, and he was very ebullient he was. And I said to him, okay, why was it so important for you that I came to Gaza with these musicians? And you know what he said to me? He says, you know, the people in the world have forgotten Gaza. The few who remember us send us medicine and food, and we are grateful for that. But you would do the same thing for animals. They also need food and medicine. But by your coming here, you reminded us that we are human beings. Never have I had a compliment like this, not in Berlin, and not in Vienna, and not in New York, and nowhere.
You've said in the past, I think the main lesson for all us non-politicians is that we can and we should build bridges with the people and not wait for the governments to do it. And you do it through music, and many would say that that's naive.
You have something better? Look at the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. 65 years since the creation of the State of Israel. Everything that is military or political has been tried and tried again, and nothing has happened, and it doesn't move. It doesn't move. And it's all very well to point the fingers and say whose fault it is, but it doesn't work. Therefore, you need something else. Our orchestra, the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, is not an orchestra of normalization in the Israeli point of view. In other words, normalization is a good word all over the world, except in the Arab world, because in the Arab world it is symptomatic of maintaining the present situation and not let it change. And that is not what the West Eastern Divan is about. The West Eastern Divan is about accepting the fact that we have here two peoples, the Israelis and the Palestinians, who both were victims at some point. And there's no point in arguing, yes, I was more a victim than you or not. They were victims. And they have the same rights. They must have the same rights on the land. Therefore, the political way of finding a compromise a few kilometers here for the border is never going to work, because you have to get to the point where people see it for what it is, namely not as a political conflict, but as a human conflict between two people with a history of victimhood, two peoples who deeply believe they have the right to live in the same little piece of land. This equality exists in the orchestra. In the orchestra, when the oboe player is an Arab, all the Israelis who are in the orchestra want him to play it well, to give him the support they need. This doesn't happen in reality, because the conditions of equality are not there, and because we have this terrible policy of the settlements and other things, which creates two different levels of society.
Now, I imagine it's quite a learning curve for those involved within the orchestra, because they come, they meet new people on the opposite side of the divide, and perhaps they learn.
I think so. I think the people that have come through the divan, and it's now in its 14th year, have changed so many of their preconceived ideas. They still don't agree, and they shouldn't. We don't expect to have a political consensus. We want a consensus about Beethoven when we play Beethoven. We want everybody to think alike and to work together for a unity. But we don't dictate, nor do we expect a political consensus.
So what is the dynamic like backstage? You have Israelis, you have Palestinians, you have Syrians, you have Lebanese musicians.
Egyptians.
Do they never argue?
Of course they argue all the time. And I think this is very healthy. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict is very asymmetrical in many ways. It is asymmetrical starting by the fact that there is a state of Israel and there is no state of Palestine. One is occupier and the other is occupied, and so many other aspects. But in one aspect it is perfectly symmetrical, and that is the lack of curiosity about the other. I don't mean about the policies of the government of the other, but a lack of curiosity about the other as human beings.
Are we talking actually there about just tolerance, though, between Israelis and Palestinians within your orchestra, or true acceptance?
Neither. It is somewhere in between. It is saying, my God, how can you, who play with me on the same stand in the orchestra, how can you, who play the same music, who tries to do exactly the same thing, the same volume, the same intensity, the same intonation, how can you have a different point of view? One day you will change. And I'm here to make you do that.
So that's all very well, but that's within the confines of the orchestra on a micro scale, if you like. How can you translate that to a political scale between countries on the macro scale?
I don't know, but I don't claim to do that. I don't claim to do that.
But that's what you're saying about music. That music
I think that's what
bridge.
Music can do. I'm a musician. I'm not a politician. And if I had the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in my pocket, believe me, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you as much as I enjoy it, but I would do it. This is not what I'm about. I'm not a politician. In many ways, I'm an anti-politician, because to be a politician you have to be the master of compromise, and to be an artist you have to do everything except compromise. Music making in its highest form is the art of most resistance, not evade the problems but really solve the essence of them. And also you have to understand, I was born in Argentina, and my family moved to Israel early in the 50s, in 1952 already. And much later I came to realize that the Israeli narrative was, for me, extremely uncomfortably one-sided.
And what encouraged you in that direction? What made you diverge away from the course of the Israeli narrative?
I was in Australia, of all places, in 1970. If you remember Black September, when they killed so many Palestinians in Jordan, and I read a statement by the then Israeli Prime Minister, Madame Golda Meir, where she says, what is this talk of the Palestinians? There is no Palestinian people. We are the Palestinian people. And I thought to myself, just a moment, I went to school there where this we takes place, and I was never made aware of that. We were totally disconnected with that. And then I started digging for myself, and I felt that this is terrible. And it's terrible to mostly naturally towards the Palestinian, but it's also terrible for Israel, for the Jewish people, because in the end Israel has remained a ghetto. What is the difference between the Warsaw Ghetto and Israel? The difference is that Israel is strong, has an army, and they don't get killed. But the mentality of being closed in, and we have the Jewish history and the Jewish philosophy and the Jewish metaphysics and the Kabbalah and all those things have a very, very, very high level of morality in them, right through the centuries. But it is practiced only in the little enclave. It's as if it doesn't apply to the relations with non-Jews. This has to change. And what I do, if you want, in a nutshell, and I don't care whether you think it is naive or not, I do this because I feel an inner need. I think there is a has been a terrible injustice done to the Palestinians, and I think the policies of the Israeli government at the moment are incredibly stupid, cruel, and short-sighted, and the settlements stand in the way, and there is not the regard for the Palestinian as equals. Some musicians in the orchestra don't agree with my views about the conflict, but they respect it, and they come and talk to me and they say, but how can you say that, and how can you do that? And you see, the whole level of equation is not right. You can't say Hamas sends rockets and therefore we are going to bash them. This is, first of all, it's cruel. Secondly, it is stupid, and it's not conducive to anything. Why do they do that? Because they have a feeling that they also have a right there. So let's deal with that. I've always been very worried about all those things, and now it is beyond resignation. It is despair.
Do you think you will see total and complete resolution to the conflict in your lifetime?
I don't know how long I'm going to live. I'm going to live. I mean, if you ask me about what I would like, how long I would like to live, then maybe yes. But in normal circumstances, I don't believe it. There has to be a complete change. There has to be a complete change of accepting the others, and there has to be a complete change of the actual way of being. I will give you a very small example of what I mean. Jewish humor, so famous and enjoyed by so many millions of people for so many years, including many, many millions of Arabs. The Jewish humor is
self-deprecating.
Self-deprecating. And the Jewish humor is also something that has been developed as a means of self-defense. Humor is something that works in situations where normal thinking, rational thinking doesn't work. That's why there's so many jokes in places where dictatorships and where you cannot really, are not allowed to criticize, but you create jokes about them, and this way you get over them. Now, this is wonderful, but you cannot have the same sense of humor, the same joke about somebody of whom you are under his control as when you are in control of the others. You cannot have the same humor to fight against oppressive anti-Semitism in Europe as a means of survival, and you cannot use the same kind of humor with the Palestinians, where you are actually in control and where you are actually determining what quality of life they have. You have to change. Therefore, it requires a complete rethinking of so many things in the Jewish heritage. And this is not happening. This is simply not happening. And all this is the work that I feel has to be done. Has to be done before you negotiate and before you talk about that. You know, if I were a Palestinian politician and I would meet with the Israeli Prime Minister, whoever he is, I will say to him, I know what is the difference between a religious Jew and a religious Christian or religious Muslim. But what is the difference between a secular Jew and a secular Muslim or Christian? Because until you, Prime Minister of Israel, there comes a day when you can explain to me what is the difference, I don't see why you need a state only for yourselves. Very simple, actually. But all this thinking process is not really being elaborated in Israel.
Can you have those kind of conversations with the leaders in Israel? Do you meet those kind of people?
I don't meet the leaders. I have no contact with the political elite in Israel. I have these kind of conversations with the musicians in the orchestra and with people that I meet from Israel. But you meet very intelligent people who know and understand so many things about medicine or about music or about so many other things, and then you start talking about the conflict and suddenly the wall comes down. Suddenly you have another sensitivity, suddenly, or lack thereof, and you have another way of using your brain. It is extraordinary. And this is why the Palestinians are tired of the double standards that are applied.
But there's plenty of work to be done from their side as well.
Of course. I speak about the Israeli side because I think I know that better, and I grew up in the Palestinians, of course, have to also accept that Israel is a reality, that the Jews have a right to live in that place as well, and that violence is not going to be the solution.
Do you think you could settle? I mean, it's a bit hypothetical in a way, but very hypothetical. But if you could sit down, say, somebody with a strident Israeli view and a strident member of Hamas, what would you play? What piece of music could you play them, do you think, to try and demonstrate your way of thinking? What could bridge that divide?
First of all, you would have to educate them both in music, which neither of them are educated in music. So you couldn't have that kind of a dialogue. But music, you know, what is music? How is music actually written? You have rhythm that everybody understands. Harmony is already a little more difficult. And there is counterpoint. The nature of music is, for me, therefore, the nature of the human being. I say something and you comment on it, or agree with it, or disagree with it.
It's a conversation.
It's always a dialogue. And in music, you can have a dialogue much better than in real life. Because, look, we are having, I think, quite a pleasant conversation,
yeah, but
you and I. Okay?
Absolutely.
But I speak and you listen, and then you speak and I listen. In music,
they're all talking
go
at the same time.
And this is so Middle Eastern. We always talk at the same time. Maybe this is the solution.
Well, we'll leave it there. Maestro Barenboim, thank you very much.
Thank you.